Okay, so we're back. So, as I shared, it had been a year and I had been in my own place, and it felt good to wake up without being surrounded by in an emotionally abusive atmosphere and that had become toxic. So, it was good for me to be by myself, even though I was processing the pain, going through the anger, going through the outrage, going through the amazing sense of betrayal and abandonment. And I'm sure some of you have already made the things with my father. Yes, I think that sometimes our soul wants to heal something. It wants to redeem something in us. So it allows us to attract people that are going to push those buttons and bring those things up to say, no, you still need to heal that thing. And so there were many characteristics that my ex-husband had that reminded me of my relationship with my father, especially the abandonment, the emotional abuse. That said, it grew something in me. Like I said, I don't regret the pain parts, the parts of pain, the parts of uncomfortableness, discomfort, because something needed to grow in my spirit. I needed to recognize my value. I needed to get to a place that no one would ever make me question it again. I was in a relationship with someone who did not know how to love me. And so their character flaw made me question whether I was lovable. There was still that little girl wound somewhere. Like I said, remember, there are different layers that God revealed to me, like, tap, tap, girlfriend, you need to, there's some still work you need to do because you are again letting another man make you forget who I say you are. And so when I promise you that will never happen again, I promise you learned my lesson. But I didn't know it then. And I didn't know it. Sometimes you don't know until you're in it. So I had to once again go through something with someone who didn't treat me as I treated them and learn on the other end, learn as I went through the pain, learn as I went through the trauma of that. But, and I want to say this too, I was not a perfect wife, and I am in no way saying that I was. I was not a perfect wife, but I was a good wife. And the things that happened, I did not deserve. And I was able to talk to my ex sort of at the end of it, sort of at the end when we were going through our divorce. And he told me, he said, you didn't do anything to me. You never did anything wrong. You didn't. And that was a little healing because I knew I hadn't, but it was good to know that he knew that too. I just think he did not want to be in our marriage. And so there was, like I said, a cruelty that came out of not wanting to be somewhere and a bad behavior and a poor treatment that came out of that. Um, so I was out of it. But I do want to say this. Like I said, I never got that apology that I wanted. I never got somebody where he owned the pain that he caused. He owned the behavior, or he owned even the betrayal of what he did with the ex. He didn't own any of that. And so sometimes you don't get that, and you have to forgive in spite of it, and you have to keep moving on anyway, which was what I've done. But let me give you my full journey. So it had been a year. I had been on my own, and I knew it was time to really forgive in a new way. It was time to forgive because, like I said, I had been in too much pain and needing healing before I was able to even consider forgiving. So it just was on my spirit. It was like, okay, it's time to forgive. It's time to let this go. And the first feeling I felt was fear. And I was like, why am I afraid to let this go? Why am I afraid to forgive? And what I realized, to my surprise and shock and upset, I had begun to let the pain of that journey become my story. And so I had become married to my story. And my story went something like this, that this person I loved and trusted hurt me, and there was emotional cruelty, and felt betrayed. And that was the story that I had, told myself every day, and I had lamented about, and I had become married to that story. And I had become so married to that story that when it was time to forgive and let it go, I was like, well, wait a minute, who am I without that story? I had then let that story become my identity. And I knew that that was a problem. I knew that anytime that I feel genuine fear because I can't let a story go is when I need to get to work, which is when I knew I had to let it go. Because if the question was, what will I have in place of my story of sadness and rejection that I had constantly told myself over and over again, the answer was, when I finally let that story go, when I finally released that story, in that space that I was afraid, that blank space was going to be in my heart, well, what am I going to have without this story, was the light of God would come in and fill me up with his love, with his healing, with his restoration. But in order to get what God had waiting for me, I had to be willing to let go of my addiction to the story and the pain and the martyrdom that came with it. So sometimes something happens to us, and that thing is real, that person did that thing, and it's real, and they shouldn't have done it, and it was wrong. But we tell ourselves the story of what happened. We tell our friends the story of what happened. We tell our family the story of what happened. And then we become addicted to that story. We become addicted to that pain that they caused. And now I'm a martyr. And now I'm the victim of what they did. And that becomes the thing. And you get so entangled into that story that you miss the healing on the other side. So when I was ready for the healing, like I said, I found my first feeling being fear. Like, what is this? And I realized, and I know I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating, that I was afraid to release that story because I had made the mistake of becoming married to it. And I felt like if I released it, I would have this empty space in my heart. And then what would I do? Who was I without the story that I had been telling myself for a year? That I was this person that was hurt and I had been done wrong. He did me wrong. And that's not who I am at all. So this week, you're going to look at what the root, your thing is that is causing you or challenging you with either releasing the pain or disappointment of the past, or releasing or being able to forgive. So you're going to look at the root of what is challenging you and making it hard for you to forgive or release. The root cause of why you can't forgive or release the disappointment. Mine was fear. I let my story, like I said, become my identity. And I didn't know who I was if I wasn't this woman who had this horrible thing done to her by this dude. Well, like I said, that's not who I am. The fact is, that was just a blip on the screen of my journey. That was what happened to me that no longer needed to be a part of my identity. And I no longer wanted to make the pain of my past or the pain of that thing that happened to me back then a part of my identity. And I didn't want it to be the center focus of my life, where I run over the thing of how he did and tell my story to myself, I didn't tell it to keep telling to friends, but tell my story to myself over and over again. I had begun sick of my own story. So when I realized that I was addicted to it, I knew it was time to release it. So how do you recognize your why? My why was fear. What is your why? What is your why of the reason you are having trouble forgiving? What is your why of the reason that you are having trouble releasing? So we're going to recognize your root cause. What is wrong with my words today? We're going to recognize your root cause. So the other thing I want to say is, when you don't release, you let the pain of your past dictate your reality. Because like I said, you're living in the past, and the only thing that truly exists is the present. So when I did not release that story, when I was married to the story, I was letting the pain of my past dictate my new reality. And you never want to be there. You never want to give anybody that leverage, or any pain or any story that leverage over your new reality. There will be a season, like I said, that you need to heal. And you might need to cry, and you might need to vent, and you might need to scream. There is time and season for that. But when that time and season is over, it is time to forgive. It is time to release. And if you're having problems with that, we need to figure out what that root is. Okay? So I knew that I needed to, no, I knew that I had forgiven, and I knew that I had gotten to a new place, because like I said, when I figured out that I was addicted to that story and I needed to release that story, I did the work to release it, and we're going to get to that, but I did the work to release it, and I knew that I had released it when I was able to forgive, and I could be happy for my ex-husband, who is now married to the woman whose relationship began in my marriage. And the fact that I can laugh about that shows you I'm in a complete new place. And like I said, I've released that, I've forgiven that, and I truly wish him the best. And a lot of people are really like, oh my God, can you be? Because why? Why would I hold on to something that no longer exists? It no longer exists. That pain was in the past. I'm not going to keep myself in prison rehashing what somebody did to me that is in the past, that no longer exists. I'm going to open my heart to get healing. I'm going to take the time that I need to mourn it, which is what I did. I'm going to realize what's blocking my road to forgiveness. I'm going to pull that out by the root so I can overcome it and be free and live my life. The joy that awaits for me, the new love that awaits for me. And that's what I want for you. So let's get into what is your root. And I do want to say this too. And I covered this in last week, but also when you forgive, you no longer need to punish that person. So with my ex, I didn't want anything bad. I know, like, when the things first happened, I didn't wish bad on him, but I definitely didn't wish good. It was just, all I had was pain and anger, what I call piss and vinegar. That's all I had. But when I forgave, all I want is the best. And all I want is to move on in my joy and in my goodness. And there is no loop of anger that I play in my head about the past. I can share what happened with you, and because that's real and that's a part of my story, and I get to share my story with who I want to, and I'm sharing it with you so you can identify, so you can use it in your own healing, in your own growth, and in your own journey towards forgiveness. But other than that, I don't even think about that past. I wake up most days very happy and very hopeful about what God has for me in my present and in my future. So let's talk about, you have this week, you have a you have a downloadable on how to find your root. And I want to go over that with you. But I just remembered one other thing that I want to tell you about forgiveness and getting past. Sorry, I'm kind of looking at notes. I'm looking at you, and I'm remembering things that I want to share with you that I think are important. And that is regret. Do I regret marrying my husband, ex-husband? No, I don't regret marrying him, because there were moments of joy. There were moments of love. There were moments of laughter. And so I don't regret that time. Love is a beautiful thing, and it's not often found. So it was found in a season of my life. It did not go to where I thought it would, but I don't begrudge it, and I don't regret it. And I'm glad I experienced the good parts that I did experience. Number two, I don't regret the pain that I experienced. I don't like that I was treated that poorly. That will never be okay. But like I said, that there was something for me to learn from it. So when you look back on something that you forgive, when you don't regret it, when you can see that you could learn something from it, and this is not going to be every instance. If something heinous, horrible happened to you, then yeah, that was bad. And I mean something horrible. Like, I don't want to name those things, but we all know what I'm talking about. There's not going to be a moment where you might not regret that that thing happened to you. And I'm not even talking about forgiving the person who did that to you. I'm talking about releasing its hold on you, accepting that it happened, no matter how painful and horrible it was, and making a choice that you are going to live in the present. You're going to heal from what happened to you, because maybe there's still some healing that needs to be done, but you're not going to let that thing keep you in bondage and keep you from trusting again, keep you from experiencing life fully again. You're going to make the decision not to give it that kind of power. Now, depending on what happened, that could be, for me, it was a journey of a year and a half. It could be more than that. If it was something like really egregious, some type of violation, and it was physical and abuse, that's not something you're going to get over overnight. And that's not something you may release lickety split. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some healing, but you can begin the work now. And it may even take some counseling. Maybe this course can get you on your way, but you're going to need counseling to get into the deeper parts of that thing that happened to you. And I think counseling is a very good and powerful and wonderful thing. So I'm talking about people who've experienced a level of violence and abuse that is egregious. And I'm not asking you, like I said, to completely forgive that person who did that to you. I'm asking you to live in the present and set yourself free from the pain and the hurt that they caused. And then maybe eventually you can release it completely. You're never saying that what they did was okay, because it'll never be okay. It will always be a horrific, disgusting thing. But your power exists in the present to overcome it and live your life fully, and not let what they did stop you from experiencing all that you are worthy and deserve to experience. And like I said, again, I'm speaking to something that was done to you that could have been extremely egregious or violent. What happened to me was a heartbreak, and it was treatment that was poor treatment, but it wasn't extremely egregious or violent. So I can, like I said, took my year and a half to heal, to get over it, to forgive and wish somebody well. That is divorce. But if something is bigger than that and far exceeding that, I want you to know that I understand that. And I am not at all expecting you to say, I forgive that person. No. I'm expecting you to concentrate on yourself. Like I said, this is your sacred space. This is your course. This is your boot camp. This is about you, not about them. So you do what you need to get to the next space of your healing, of your growth, of your freedom, of your liberation, okay? And we're not going to bring toxic people into that. So I just wanted to say that. And now I want to quickly go over what you have, because this week we are beginning new mirror work. You have new affirmations. So I'm going to stop right now, and we're going to come back in a few seconds with a new video and go over that.